How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf. Hey, Daf 5 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, Daf 5 is mamash Gavalt. Daf 5 is mamash Gavalt. At the end of the Daf yesterday, at the very end of the Daf yesterday, we mentioned the shechitah of Rav Onan. The shechitah of Rav Onan Amar Shmuel, that Yisrael mumar la'avodas kochavim mutar le'echol mishchitah. So that if you have a yid who's a mumar la'avodas kochavim, that he does avodah zarah, that he does avodah zarah, you can eat his shechitah. If he shechs an animal, says Rav Onan or Shmuel that you're allowed to eat that animal. We are going to develop that discussion and expand that discussion today. That's going to be a large part of today's daf. Interestingly, for the first section, but not like a small section, but the first section of today's daf is going to be predicated around a suda that happened between King Jehoshaphat, and King Ahab, Achav, King Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda and King Achav Melech Yisrael. That is going to be kind of the context of our initial discussion, which I think is going to be interesting. And after we discuss the sugya of eating the shechitah of a mumar la'avodah zarah, we will then discuss whether mumars can offer a korban. What I mean by that is, what if you have a mumar? A mumar is a sinner, right? Somebody who accidentally is Michal Shabbos by accident one time, he's not a mumar. He's a shoygeg and he brings the korban chatas. What if you have a person who he's a sinner? It's not his first time, it won't be his last time. He's a sinner, but he accidentally sinned. Can he bring a korban chatas? Can he bring a korban ola? Do we accept korbanis from mumars? That is going to be the second topic of Daf Hey of Masechta Chullin. So, friends, I'm looking forward to learning Daf Hey of Masechta Chullin together. I think it's going to be a great time. Come and let's enjoy ourselves. Let's have a great time, and let's learn Daf Hey of Masechta Chullin on this Lag BaOmer day. Friends, we begin on Daf Dalid Omid Beis. We have quite a bit of Dalid Omid Beis to do. I'd say about 3/7, or maybe 3/7 of the way into the Daf. I feel like slightly less than halfway into Daf Dalid Omid Beis. The first word of the line is Gufe. Gufa, we had said at the end of the daf yesterday, Amr of Onan, Amr Shmuel, says of Onan in the name of Shmuel. Yisrael mumar la'avodas kochavim. If you have a yid who's a mumar la'avodas kochavim, he does avodah zarah, unfortunately. Mutar le'echol mishchitaso, says of Onan, Amr Shmuel, you are nonetheless permitted to eat a shechitah. If he slaughters a sheep, you can enjoy that sheep. And now, Shekein matzinu b'Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda, because after all, we saw with Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda, Shenena Misudas Achav, that he enjoyed himself at a Suda where he was hosted by Achav Melech Yisrael. Now Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda, Yehoshaphat was an Er L'Chayid, he was a Yarei Shamayim. Achav was the opposite. He was a Shmendrik, he was an Oved Avodah Zarah, and an all-around bad guy. And nonetheless, we see that even though Achav was an Oved Avodah Zarah, Yehoshaphat, who was an Er L'Chayid, ate at the Suda. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Vayizbach loy Achav tzon uvakar larov. Achav had a very generous spread, and they slaughtered lots of sheep and cattle, flock and cattle. Vila'om asher imo, and with all the people that accompanied, I assume that's talking about Yehoshaphat, or maybe just Yehoshaphat and Achav. As we're going to see, there was a retinue. I don't know if that makes sense here, but why not? There was a retinue of people there, and they all had plenty to eat. Vayisiseu lalois el Ramos Gilad, and Achav convinced Yehoshaphat to march with him against Ramot Gilad, which was where ultimately Achav fell. Vidilma, Mizbach Zavach Mechol Acho. One second. What do we know for sure? We know for sure that Yehoshaphat visited Achav. Do we know that Yehoshaphat actually ate the meat? We don't know. We know that he came to the Suda. We don't know what he ate. Maybe he didn't actually eat the meat. Maybe Yehoshaphat did not actually eat the meat. Vayisiseyu ksiv, but it says that Achav was mesis Yehoshaphat, that he lured Yehoshaphat. And then you can add this note. There's a note that you can add. Bamei Siso, how did Achav lure Yehoshaphat to come to war with him against Ramos Gilad? Ba'achila v'shtia, with food and drink. How do you lure somebody to do stuff? You get good food and good drink. V'doma b'dvarim, but maybe he lured him with words. He convinced him. He made a convincing argument, maybe. Ein asasa b'dvarim, luring is not verbal. Luring is with good food and good drink. Achav served cattle and flock, sheep and cow and all sorts of steaks and stuff. And then he says, no. So Yehoshaphat, what do you say we go to war together? Got him. Velo, verbal is not enough, is insufficient. The pasuk again, where is it? Probably Sefer Devarim. Probably Parshas Re'eh or something. That if it's talking about a mesis, somebody who convinces someone else to do avodah zarah. Is that not talking about making a convincing argument? Ba'achila v'shtia, no. You give him a good meal, you have together a nice suda, and you say, what do you say for dessert? We offer a sacrifice to Babble. He's got him. But what about with the Rabbeinu Shalom and the Satan? In the story of Job, in the story of Eov, of course, the story of Eov opens up that all of the servants of God are there with the Rabbeinu Shalom, and in comes the Satan who was traversing the earth, and the Rabbeinu Shalom says to the Satan, while you were traversing, did you notice Eov, big Yarei Shamayim, great guy? And the Satan, of course, says he's only a great guy because he's got a great life. Easy to be a Yarei Shamayim when everything's so good. He's a wealthy guy, big family, lots of kids. Life's great. It's easy to worship God then and be a Yarei Shamayim. Things are easy. The Rabbeinu Shalom says, okay, do him what you want, just keep him alive. And the Satan ruins his life, destroys his wealth, kills all of his kids. And you know what Eov says? Hashem nosan, Hashem lokach, yi shem Hashem mivorach. And the next time the Rabbeinu Shalom sees the Satan, he says, you see, you ruined his life and he didn't budge. So the Rabbeinu Shalom says, you convinced me to allow you to destroy his life. That must have been a verbal convincing. The Satan didn't make a barbecue for the Rabbeinu Shalom and says, now what do you say? You let me destroy Eov's life. It was an argument. So we see that mesis could just be an argument. The Maila shiny, no, it's obviously different when it comes to Rabbeinu Shalom. Obviously, the Satan was not going to be feeding the Rabbeinu Shalom. But for the people, we are talking about food and drink. Luring somebody with food and drink. Okay, fine. So if that's the case, so Achav lured Yehoshaphat to come to battle with him through food and drink, which Memela means that Yehoshaphat was eating meat that was slaughtered by Achav, right? V'dilma mishta ashti mecholava lo achol. But maybe Yehoshaphat didn't eat. Maybe he just drank. But he didn't eat the meat. But Maishna shtia. But one second, why? Meaning, if Yehoshaphat is being offered food and drink, you're saying, well, he didn't eat the meat, but he did drink the wine. Well, why would he be able to do one and not the other? Maishna shtia da'minon Mumar la'avodas k'chov lo avim mumar l'chol ha'torah kula. Why should it be allowed to drink the wine? Is it because we're going to say that even though Achav was a mumar la'avodas zarah, he's not a mumar l'chol ha'torah kula, and therefore Yehoshaphat could drink the wine. Now, I don't necessarily understand that, because I would imagine that the whole point of not drinking the wine is a concern about Yeh Nesech, which is avodah zarah, so I can understand why you wouldn't want to drink the wine, but I don't know why it's a good proof. But anyways, we're going to reject it in a second. But anyways, so Achila Nami Mumar La'avodas Kochavim Lo Havim Mumar L'chol HaTorah Kula. If the idea that we're saying is that he's allowed to drink because we're saying that Achav is a Mumar La'avodas Zarah, but he's not a Mumar L'chol HaTorah Kula. If he's not a Mumar L'chol HaTorah Kula, so then what's the problem with eating the meat? Either then the shechitah should be fine. So Achi Hashta Shesiya Stam Yenanu. Well, here's the thing. The reason why he was allowed to drink the wine is because what's the issue with the wine? We didn't see Achav libate the wine for Avodah Zarah, but it's Stam Yenam. We have to assume that his wine was used for Avodah Zarah. V'adayin lo neser Stam Yenam shalov de kocham. The thing is, at that point in time, the Stam Yenam, right at that point in time, there wasn't actually an issue of Stam Yenim. Stam Yenim was later on with Hillel and Shammai. But at that point with Achav and Yehoshaphat, there was not an issue of Stam Yenim. So therefore there would really be no reason to say that the wine is problematic. So maybe Yehoshaphat drank the wine, but he refrained from eating the meat. Aval Achila, when it comes to eating, however, mumar but I'll say though that when it comes to the meat, on the other hand, since Achav is a mumar la'avodah zarah, he's a mumar l'chol ha'torah kula, and therefore Yehoshaphat was unable to eat the meat, and he refrained from eating the meat, and all he did was drink the wine. So there's no raya that Yehoshaphat necessarily ate the meat. Maybe he just drank the wine. First of all, that wouldn't make sense. Yehoshaphat, Melech Yehuda, the king of Judah, he's not just going to sit there, kind of like, when a Yid goes to a business meal at a non-kosher restaurant, and kind of just get a beer, or like my cousin would he would tell him he's on the Miami Beach diet. Completely made it up. It was literally raw vegetables that you couldn't do anything to. You just, the Miami Beach diet was, I can only eat tomatoes. That just give me raw tomatoes. Anyways, yeah, he told me he's on the Miami Beach diet, and it's that you just have to give me raw vegetables. Don't cut them or anything like that. Just put it on a plate. I'll go put him. So Yehoshaphat was not sitting there and awkwardly just like drinking wine, while there were cows and goats and sheep and everything you might want that was being served by Achav. So lav orche de malka mishtaya below mechla. V'bais ema, alternatively vayizbach vayisiseu ksiv. Alternatively, the pasuk says vayizbach, that they slaughtered the animals vayisiseu, and then Achav lured Yehoshaphat. Kilu, there's a direct connection between the two verbs vayizbach and vayisiseu. So how did Achav lure Yehoshaphat to come to battle with him? Bizvicha, it was through the spread that he offered. It was through the meat. So it's not shaykh to say that Yehoshaphat was sitting there awkwardly and not eating. Of course he was eating. So the question is why? For now we're assuming that it's because, like Rav Anan says, that even though Achav was a mumar la'avodah zarah, one can still eat his shechitah. But now the Gemara suggests, V'dilma Ovadia Zavach. Maybe it was Ovadia, Achav's servant. Ovadia. Maybe Ovadia did the shechitah. And Ovadia, the Navi says, he was a Yarei Shamayim. Ovadia was the Yarei Shamayim. Maybe he shechted the animals, and that's why Yehoshaphat ate it. Achav didn't shecht the animals. La Rov Ksiv, it says that there was a lot of them, a lot of cows, a lot of sheep, a lot of everything. Velvaja lo avasapik, it would have been overwhelming. It would have been too much for one person. It would have been too much for Ovadia to have done himself. V'dilma shivas alofim zavoach. Maybe it was the 7,000 who slaughtered all the animals. D'chsiv b'sharti b'Yisrael shivas alofim kol birkayim asher leikaru lebal v'gomer. The Rabban Shalom says to Eliyahu Hanavi that from all of Israel, he is only going to leave over 7,000 Yidden. Those are the 7,000 Yidden who did not bow down to Baal. So maybe it was those 7,000 Yidden, they were the ones who did the shechitah, and therefore it was a kosher shechitah. Tamuri havu mitamre me Izevel. No, because Izevel was on a crusade. Achav's wife, Jezebel, Izevel, evil, scheming, cunning woman. She was on a crusade to kill all of the Yerushalayim. Anybody who was near L'chayid, she wanted dead. So anybody who was in that group of 7,000 would have been hiding. V'dilma gavre de Achav havumaylu. Well, maybe Achav was a shlemazel, but the people around him, but his circles, they were L'chayidin and they were in charge of the shechitah. Lo sal gadaitich, impossible. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Moshel makshiv al dvar sheker, that when you have a ruler who listens to lies, the assumption is that's, Achav fits that label. Call misharsa v'shoyim, all of his servants, everybody associated with him, his circle, they're all shlemazels as well. No, they're all a bunch of, just, right, like leader, like leaded. Achav's a shlemazel, his all circles are shlemazels, they all do avodah zarah. No. V'dilma gavre di Yoshafat nami lo avu mailu. Maybe Yehoshaphat was an L'chayid, but the people, his retinue, I don't know what a retinue is. I'm going to assume that a retinue is like the people he came with. But his retinue, they were not as Erlich. So therefore, Zavayach Gavri the Achav Achul Gavri the Yehoshaphat. So maybe all of the retinue of Achav, they slaughtered lots of animals, and the retinue of Yehoshaphat ate those animals, because all of the retinues of Achav and of Yehoshaphat, they were all shlemazels. So they ate all that meat. Zavach Ovadia Acha Yehoshaphat, but for Yehoshaphat, who was Ner L'chayid, Ovadia slaughtered specifically for Yehoshaphat, and that is what Yehoshaphat ate. Lo sal kadaitech, no, it's not shaykh to say that Yehoshaphat's retinue was shlemazels, midamosho makshiv al dvar sheker kol misharsa v'shoyim, just like we say in the pasuk in Mishlei that when you have a leader who's a shmendrik, so then all of his retinue are shmendriks. The inverse is also true. Halidvar emes misharsa tzadikim. When you have a leader who's an L'chayid, so all of his retinue are also L'chayidin. So therefore Yehoshaphat and all of his retinue, they were all Erlich, and therefore, again, we got to figure out how this meat was being served to them. V'dilma zavoyach gavre de Achov ochel Achov v'gavre zavoyach gavre de Yehoshaphat ochel Yehoshaphat v'gavre. Well, maybe everybody slaughtered their own meat. Achov and his retinue were responsible for slaughtering their meat, and Yehoshaphat and his retinue of L'chayidin were responsible for slaughtering their meat, and that way Yehoshaphat and his people had kosher meat. Lo ava maflig nafshe mine Yehoshaphat and Achav were like peas and carrots, lamb and tuna fish, spaghetti and meatballs. They were together, tzezamin. Whatever Achav was eating, Yehoshaphat was eating dezel bezach. How do we know this? If it's based on the right way. So when Achav says to Yehoshaphat, "Nu, come to battle with me," Yehoshaphat says, "Kamoni kamocha, what's mine is yours. Ka'ami kamecha, my nation is your nation." So maybe that's how we know that they were tzezamen. So they were together, and they would also eat the same food, the same meat. So Elamayata kisusai kisusecha achinami. Well, then how do you explain my horses are like your horses? What does that mean? So I'll tell you what it means. Elamad dehave asusecha tehave asusai. What it means is that whatever the fate of whatever will be the fate of your horses will be the fate of my horses. Kilo, we're in it where my horses will be taking up the same mission as your horses. Hachinami, and here also, my dehave Allah ve'ilave amach, whatever is going to be upon you and your nation, tehave olai ve'ilave ami, will be the same for me and my nation. But again, that's more of like whatever is going to happen to you is going to happen to me. It's not to say that we're together and we're going to eat the same meat. Rather from here, Umelech Yisrael, the king of Israel, Achav, v'Yoshaphat Melech Yehuda, and Jehoshaphat, Yoshvim ish al kisai milubashim begadim. They were each sitting on their respective thrones, begoren Pesach Shar Shomron, at the granary at the entryway to the gate of Shomron. And before them were prophets. They had asked the prophets, shall we go to war against Ramot Gilad? Will we be successful? And all the prophets were saying, yes, you will be successful, even though they weren't. It's a whole story. My Gerin, what is the Gerin over there? What is the granary that they were sitting in? Ilema Gerin Mamish, if it literally means a granary. Atushar Shomron Gorinava, what, the entrance to Shomron was a granary? What does that mean? Ela ki Gorin, what it means is that they were sitting opposite one another like a Gorin. What does that mean? Disnan, we learned in Masechta, in a Mishnah Masechta Sanhedrin Aitza Kichatzi Gorin Agula, that the Sanhedrin was like half of a round, basically a half circle. Kedei sheyu roin zeh, so that if everybody in the Sanhedrin was sitting next to each other, then the people at the ends of the row would be unable to see each other. But by making it a half circle, everyone can look at everybody else and make arguments with one another and make sure that the topic is being properly discussed. So what Goren means is that they were sitting opposite each other. And what does Rashi say? Ki Goren are yoshvim bechiba v'reis, with love and appreciation, uvaguda achas, in one bundle. Ki Sanhedrin she'en choshin zeh, just like a Sanhedrin that nobody suspects each other. So we see that Yehoshaphat and King Achav were mamish very close, and they had a lot of trust for one another, and therefore, of course, Yehoshaphat was eating the shechitah of Achav. So from here, it would in fact seem from here that a mumar la'avodah zarah like Achav, Yehoshaphat was nonetheless able to rely upon his shechitah. So now this next section of the daf, I think is interesting that we're learning it on Lag Boimer, because it discusses when in chapter 17 of the book of Kings 2 of Melachim Beis, Eliyahu Hanavi is introduced, and it says that he goes to Achav, and he says, what does he say? He says, I think that there's not going to be any rain. I think that's what he tells Achav. And then after that, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you have to go and you have to hide. You have to hide from Achav. And when he was hiding from Achav, how did he eat? Well, there was a stream of water there, and every day the Rebbeinu Shalom would send him ravens with bread and with meat. Which is very interesting because it's reminding of. It's not the word I was thinking of, but it reminds of the Lag Boimer story, at least the story that we attribute with Lag Boimer, that when Reb Shimon was forced to flee from the Romans, and ultimately him and his son Reb Elazar Reb Shimon hid in a cave, and there was, what was it? There was I think also a stream of water there, right? And there was a carob tree, and they ate they drank from the stream, and they ate from the fruits of the carob tree. Anyways, interesting that this story comes up on Lag Boimer. Now, let us say that this story about Eliyahu Hanavi when he had to run away from Achav is also a support for the notion that mumar la'avodah zarah, you can eat the shechitah. Lechem ubasar baboker, that the ravens would bring for Eliyahu Hanavi bread and meat in the morning, v'lechem uvasar ba'erev, as well as bread and meat in the evening. But Mavuda Marab, Mibei Taboche de Achov, that where did that bread and meat come from? From the kitchens of Achav. So we see that he ate the meat that was coming from Achav. Eliyahu Hanavi ate the meat that was coming from Achav, a mumar lavodah zarah. Apiadi Burshani, to which the Gemara says, no, that was kind of a unique scenario where this was coming from the Rabbanu Shalom. The Rabbanu Shalom he sent ravens with food and bread and meat. That was kind of a unique circumstance, not to bring a raya from there. My Orvim, what were these ravens? Ravina Orvim Mamish. Ravina says, ravens. Omle Rav Ada bar Manyomi says, Rav Ada bar Manyomi, Vidilma Trey Gavre Dave Shmayu Orvim. Maybe it was two people came by, and their name was Orvim. Interesting name, Orvim. Milok Siv. After all, do we not have a pasuk by the judge Gidon in the Shoftim? Gidon, it says that he fought against the Midyanim and he defeated the two officers of Midyan, Vayargu es Orev b'sur Orev v'se'ev v'gomer, and they killed Orev, that was somebody's name, as well as Ze'ev. So we see that Orev could be a person's name. So Amar le Ravina responds, V'esramoy milso de tarvayu hava shmayu Orvim. What, it just so happened to be that both people's names were Orvim? It's kind of a unique name. They both had the same name. V'dilma al shem mikomen. Well, maybe they're called Orvim based on the fact that they came from the same place. The place was called Orvim. So they were called Orvim. Two Orviim people. Two Orveins. Miloksiv, after all, we have a pasuk. Where is this pasuk? In Melachim Beis. The pasuk that I was talking about with Eliyahu Hanavi, I think I said it was Melachim Beis, it was Melachim Aleph. Va'aram yotzu gdudim vayishbu me'eretz Yisrael naira ketana. That it says in Melachim Beis that Aram went to Eretz Yisrael and they took captive a Jewish girl who was a naira ketana, which doesn't make any sense. Because as we know from Seder Noshim, ketana, naira, bogeres, they're different ages. So how could you have a naira who's also a ketana? You're either a naira or you're a ketana. Vikashalon karila naira, v'karila ketana. Is she a naira or is she a ketana? From her piras, ketana demin na'orin. She was a ketana. She was from a place called Na'orin. So we see that we could refer to somebody based on where they come from. So nonetheless, says Ravina Imkain or Viyim Mibai Le, that if it was two people from a place called Orev, then there would be Orviyim, just like you would have Yisraeliyim or Mitzriyim or Ivriyim. So it would have been Orviyim, but it doesn't say it. It says Orvim. So Ravina says it's talking about two ravens. Givaldik. Now says the Gemara, so just to go back to that for a second, so we wanted to say that maybe the fact that these birds were bringing food from Achav's kitchen, maybe that was a raya that you can eat the shechitah of a mumar to which we said, no, that was unique because that was being orchestrated directly from the Rabbanu Shalom. That was kind of a unique scenario. We are now going to quote the same braise that we quoted at the end of the daf yesterday, and we're going to kind of quote it in a backwards way. As we'll see in a second. Basically, yesterday at the end of the daf, we quoted this brisa, and we wanted to learn it one way. We said, no, learn it the other way. Initially, we wanted to say, okay, at the end, if you remember, we're going to read the brisa again in a second, so don't worry. But this brisa had said that a mumar, what was it called? A mumar Yisrael, I think we said, is allowed to do shechitah. And we said, what is this mumar? We wanted to say it's a mumar ochanevelis teyovan, and that it's a raya for a rave, that as long as you give him the knife, you could trust his shechitah. To which we said, no, it's talking about a mumar la'avodah zarah. That even though avodah zarah is equated with kol Torah kula, nonetheless he's allowed to do shechitah. And then we got into this whole arichos, this whole discussion today about mumar la'avodah zarah. Can they do shechitah? So let's say that brisa that we quoted at the end of the daf yesterday is a raya to say that mumar la'avodah zarah, you can eat their shechitah, as we said that in that brisa the mumar is a reference to mumar la'avodah zarah. So here we go. Let's say that braisa from the end of the daf yesterday is a raya, is a support to say that a mumar l'avodah zarah you can eat his shechitah. Hakil shechatin, everybody can do shechitah. Vafilu kusi, even a kusi. Vafilu oral, even a yid without a bris milah. Vafilu Yisrael mumar, and even a yid who is a mumar. Hi oral lechidami. What is the scenario with that the braisa is saying that an oral, a yid without a bris milah, can do shechitah? If it's talking about, it's like we saw yesterday. If it's talking about a yid whose brothers had died when they had done bris milah, so therefore this yid did not do bris milah it was a real risk. That says Rashi, he says he's an ones. He had an acceptable reason to not do bris milah, and he's just, what does it say in the Gemara? Hayisom alyu. He's a 100% great yid, and of course we could trust his shechitah. There's a technical reason why he doesn't have a bris milah, because he learned the hard way that he probably shouldn't do it. It's unsafe for him. Elapshita mumar la'arelis. Rather, so who's this oral that the Bryce has to teach that we could eat his shechitah? A mumar la'arelis. A person who this mitzvah, the mitzvah of bris milah, he does not do. He's against it. He doesn't do it. So he's a mumar l'davar echad. He's a mumar for one mitzvah. In this context, the mitzvah of milah. But nonetheless, milah is one thing, shechitah is something else. He's a mumar for milah. He's not a mumar for shechitah, and we could eat his shechitah. Okay, but now when the Brisa then says you can also eat the shechitah of a Yisrael mumar, what's that scenario? If it's talking about a mumar l'davar echad, somebody who his mumarness is limited in scope to one mitzvah, well, that's the same thing as mumar la'arelos. We just talked about that. Elalav mumar la'avodas kechavim. So let's say, what's this mumar? It's a mumar for avodah zarah, and it's saying that you can nonetheless eat his shechitah uchd Rav Anan, and it's like Rav Anan. It's a support for Rav Anan that a mumar for avodah zarah you can nonetheless eat his shechitah. Lo, no, le'olam emelach. I say to you, mumar la'avodas kechavim. Lo, really, I'll say to you, no. Mumar for avodah zarah, you can't eat his shechitah. The Amar, because we said chamura avodas kechavim. There's two ways to read this next part. That anybody who denies avodah zarah, it's like he's being makayim the entire Torah, but also the inverse. We also see in other places the inverse, that anybody who is modeh to avodah zarah, it's like he's denying the whole Torah. That there's an equation of avodah zarah with all the entire Torah. And therefore, somebody who's in a mumar for avodah zarah is be'etzem a mumar l'kol haTorah kula. I mean, no way, we cannot eat his shechitah. Rather, who's this mumar that you can eat his shechitah? A mumar ochel nevelas l'teyovam, like we had discussed for the past, I think, 2 days. A mumar who eats nevela only because of his yetzer hara, not because he wants to be eating nevela, but because that's the only option, so he eats it, even though it's nevela. But if you gave him a kosher knife, he would do a kosher shechitah, and we can trust that shechitah like Rava. So we are explaining this. So yesterday we tried to explain it, it's support for Rava. We said no, it's talking about a mumar l'avodah zarah. Today we tried to bring it as a support for Rav Anan, and we say no, it's really like Rava says. Okay, so we want to say now that at this point we're saying no, it's not a raya to say that mumar la'avodas kechavim you can eat the shechitah. No, it's not a raya for that. However, it does still seem though that the story with Yehoshaphat and Achav, that does seem to be sticking, which is interesting because we are about to ask a question on that. And now for the rest of the daf, we are going to be discussing whether a mumar can bring a korban. Okay, if a mumar needs to or wants to bring a korban, is he allowed to, or do we say, no, you're a mumar, go home? And through that discussion, where there's going to be an nafkamina for mumar l'avodah zarah, whether he's considered a mumar l'chol haTorah kula, which would have an nafkamina for if we can eat shechitah. Now, says the Gemara Meisvei, we have a question against Rav Anan. Rav Anan had said, mumar l'avodah zarah, you can eat a shechitah. We're going to bring a raya from a brayse that you can't. Here it goes. That the pasuk by an olas nidava says, I think it was the second pasuk in Sefer Devarim, says, Dabro b'nei Yisrael, I'm going to read the pasuk, Dabro b'nei Yisrael, v'martalem, odem ki yakriv mikem, korban Hashem and abema, etc. Second pasuk in Sefer Vayikra. It says, mikem, from you, not all of you, part of you. Not all Yidden can bring korbanos. Some Yidden can't. V'lo kulchem, not all of you, la'otzias mumar, excluded is a mumar. A mumar, we're going to have to define what kind of a mumar, but a mumar cannot bring a korban ola. Mikem bachem chilakti v'lo beumis. That when it says, right, Adam Yaakov mikem, so if we said mikem to the exclusion of mumars, right? So there are certain yidden that can bring korbanos and certain that can't. Mumars cannot bring a korban ola. Now, as Rashi points out, there is another pasuk later on that says, Ish mi beis Yisrael sheyakriv korban, etc. And as we've learned in the past, the double ish, the ish comes to include that also non-Jews could bring korbanos. And the Gemara, the Brisa is pointing out that this distinction of mikem, that only some Yidden can bring korbanos, but mumars can't, that's a distinction that exists only for Yidden, being the fact that it's mikem is in this particular pasuk, but the pasuk by ish, where we include even non-Jews can bring korbanos, there is no such distinction. So basically, we accept any korban from a non-Jew and we'll offer it in the Beis Hamikdash. In terms of Yidden, if you're a mumar, you can't bring a korban. But so mikem bochem chilakti, I make such a distinction between who can and can't offer a korban by Yidden, v'lo beumis, but not by not by non-Jews who want to bring a korban. Mina behema, that we offer a korban mina behema, lehavi b'nei adam shedom la behema. We even accept korbanos from people, from Yidden, who are like animals. What does it mean, Yidden who are like animals? Yidden who don't do mitzvahs. Animals don't do mitzvahs, and you have some Yidden that unfortunately they don't do mitzvahs either. They're like animals. Mikan Amru, from here they said, Mikablin korbanis miposhe Yisrael, that we accept korbanis from sinners, from Yidden who are sinners, kedesh yachzu ben b'tshuva, so that they do tshuva. Now, you might be thinking, wait, on the one hand we just said that you don't accept korbans from mumars, and yet you do accept from poshe Yisrael. What's the difference? We'll get there in a minute. Chutz min ha-mumar, once again comes up the mumar, that even though we say that we can accept korbanos from poshe Yisrael, not from mumars, however, umenasech esayayin, somebody does yenesech avodah zarah, umechal shabbosos b'faresya, and somebody who's mechal Shabbos in public. We have to understand what's the difference between the mumar and the reisha, the mumar and the seifa, the poshe Yisrael in the middle. What's what? Hagufa kasha, on the one hand, it's problematic. Omart mikem v'lo kulchem lo tziyas mumar. On the one hand, at the beginning of the Brisa, it says mumars cannot offer korbanis. V'other tani mikabel korbanis mi poshe Yisrael. But then we say that we can receive korbanis from poshe Yisrael. No, how are we supposed to explain that? Halei kasha, not a problem. Reisha mumar l'chol ha'Torah kula mitziasa mumar ledavar echad. The difference is, in the ratio, when we say we don't accept korbanos from a mumar, that is a mumar l'kol ha'Torah kula. All mitzvahs, all Torah, this guy does not do it. Whereas when we accept korbanos from a mumar, that is a mumar ledavar echad. There's one mitzvah, right? We saw mumar la'arelus. There's a mitzvah that he doesn't do, and we say, you know what? Let's accept a korban from him. Hopefully, what is becoming the mumar ledavar echad bekal yachzor b'tshuva l'chach mekabel me'em kedei sheyachzor. Tosfos says that the bottom Tosfos in the Daf, he says, right, I'll read that again, that mumar ledavar echad, that when you have somebody who's a mumar ledavar echad, I'm reading the bottom Tosfos of the Daf, the last two lines of the Tosfos, bekal yachzor b'tshuva, he can easily do tshuva v'lechach mekabel mem kidei sheyachzru. And therefore, we accept korbanos from them so that they will, right, hopefully we'll accept korbanos from them, they'll actually do tshuva for that one thing as well. Ema seifa, but then when it says in the seifa, chutz min mumar u'menasei chasayayin v'chal shabbos v'raseh, but then we say, so fine, we can accept korbanos from Poshe Yisrael, but not from a mumar, not from a menasei chasayayin and avodah zarah, and not from somebody who's mechal shabbos b'faraseh. Hi mumar echidami. What's this mumar? We already talked about a mumar l'chol Torah kula. We already talked about a mumar l'davar echad. What's this one? I mumar l'chol Torah kula hainu reisha. If it's mumar l'chol Torah kula, we already talked about that at the beginning of the brayse. V'i mumar l'davar echad. If it's a mumar l'davar echad, kasha mitziyasa. Well, we had said just the line before that a mumar l'davar echad can bring a korban. So that'll do tshuva. So how can you tell me that a mumar l'davar echad, now you're saying can't, right? We're excluding a mumar l'davar echad. So ela lav ochikam, this is what it's saying. Chutz min mumar l'nasei chesayayin ulchalas shabbosos b'farasiyos. Rather, what's it saying at the end? It's saying that a mumar for avodah zarah, or a mumar to be mechal shabbos b'farasiyos. So even though we said that a mumar l'davar echad, for example, mumar la'arelis we talked about, even though we said that mumar l'davar echad can bring korbanos, but if the one thing that they're a mumar for is avodah zarah, or is being mechal shabbos b'farasiyah, they can't bring korbanos. Alma, from here we see mumar la'avodas koichavim have a mumar l'chol Torah kula. So from the fact that a mumar for avodah zarah can't bring a korban, just like a mumar l'chol Torah kula can't bring a korban, it means that those are the same. That we treat a mumar l'avodah zarah like a mumar l'chol haTorah kula v'tiyufta d'Rav Anan tiyufta, and therefore that is a kasha on Rav Anan, because Rav Anan had said that a mumar l'avodah zarah you can eat his shechitah, but over here we have a brayso saying that mumar l'avodah zarah is considered like a mumar l'chol Torah kula, therefore he can't bring korbanos, and if he's a mumar l'chol Torah kula, we would be unable to enjoy his shechitah. Okay, but again, we still do have that story between Achav and Yoshafat, which, as far as I can tell, is still a raya to say that Yoshafat was allowed to eat the shechitah of Achav, who was a mumar l'avodah zarah. Anyways, fine. So we had just had a discussion about whether or not a mumar can offer korbanos, but what it's learned from there, it's learned from here. Me'am ha'aretz, it says by korban chatos, me'am ha'aretz. Not all yidden, but some of the yidden. Prat le'mumar, a mumar can't offer a korban chatos. Reb Shimon ben Yossi, Omer says Reb Shimon ben Yossi, Mishum Reb Shimon, Asher lo ta'asena b'shgag v'osam, it says by a sa'ir nasi, which is essentially also korban chatos, Asher lo ta'asena b'shgag v'osam, and it says right after that, oh hoda, and we learn up from there, hashav miyidiyaso, somebody who would, if they realize that they're doing an avera, right, if somebody's about to eat blood and they realize, wait, I'm not allowed to eat blood, right? Or if they're about to eat chalev and they say, wait, I'm not allowed to eat chalev, they would say, oops, let me stop doing this. Or if they didn't realize what they were eating and they found out, then they would stop doing it. So maybe korban al shigigaso. So then if by accident he ate chalev, so he could bring a korban chatas for that. Eno shav midiyaso, eno maybe korban al shigigaso, but somebody who, if they knew that they were eating chalev or dam, they would continue to eat it, they would not stop, so they can't bring a korban chatas. What's the difference? At the end of the day, essentially a mumar is unable to bring a korban chatas. Whether it's like the Tanakama who says that a mumar is not allowed to bring a korban chatas, or whether it's like Reb Shimon ben Yossi, Mishum Reb Shimon, that if he would do it on purpose, he's not allowed to bring a chatas. Either way, he can't bring a chatas if he does it on purpose. So v'omer of Amnuna, mumar lechol chalev, maybe korban al adam ikabenayu. And the nafkamina is, if you have somebody who's a mumar to eat chalev, that if you have somebody that he's a mumar to eat chalev, right, he'll eat chalev. He'll eat chalev. but he won't eat blood. He'll eat chaylev, but he won't eat blood. Right? So when it comes to chaylev, he doesn't have a problem eating chaylev. He's a mumar lechaylev. But blood, he has no intention of eating blood. And he accidentally ate blood. And now he wants to bring a korban chatas for having accidentally ate blood. He says, look, I don't eat blood. I don't want to eat blood. I had no intention to eat blood. I accidentally ate blood. I want to bring a korban chatas. So do we say, yeah, but you're a mumar. You can't bring a korban chatas, which is what the Tanna Kama would say. You're a mumar. You can't bring a korban chatas. But Reb Shimon would say, it's about if you would know about the avera, you wouldn't do it. Well, that would apply here. If he knew he was eating blood, he had no intention of eating blood, he would stop. So he can bring a korban chatas. So that is in Afka Mina. If you have a person who's a mumar for chaylev and he accidentally ate dam, so even though he's a mumar for chaylev, can he eat dam? Even though he's a mumar for chaylev and then he accidentally ate dam, can he bring a korban chatas for dam? The Tanna Kama would say, no, he's a mumar, he can't. And Reb Shimon would say that since he had no intention to eat the blood, and if he knew that he was eating the blood, he wouldn't have eaten it, so then he can bring the korban chatas. Now, if you're wondering, so is the Tanna Kama saying that a mumar l'davar echad cannot bring a korban chatas, right? According to the Tanna Kama, he's saying if you have a mumar l'chaylev, so then you're not allowed to bring a chatas for a dam. So isn't mumar l'chaylev a mumar l'davar echad? Didn't we say a mumar l'davar echad can bring korbanos? So then it's arguing. So in this brisa, then would be arguing on the other brisa, right? Meaning we're saying, right? What did the Gemara say? Right? We had a problem. We said, how can we learn it out from the first brisa? We learn it out from the second brisa. But it sounds like these two brisas are saying different things. Because the first brisa says mumar l'davar echad can bring korbanos, and it sounds like, at least according to the Tanna Kama here in the second brisa, if he's a mumar l'chaylev, he's not allowed to bring korbanos. Tosfos asks the kasha, and Tosfos gives a teretz from Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam's teretz is that, interestingly, friends, do you remember sometimes how do we refer to a korban chatas sometimes? Sometimes a korban chatas is referred to as a chatas chaylev. Sometimes we refer to a regular general korban chatas as a chatas chaylev, a chatas that is brought for all, for any mitzvah, so any mitzvah that would require a korban chatas is sometimes referred to, we've seen it referred to as a chatas chaylev. So Rabbeinu Tam wants to say that mumar l'chaylev is essentially saying mumar l'chol haTorah, not just a mumar l'chaylev, because chaylev is actually kind of could be seen as a general term. Very interesting answer. Anyways, so be'etzem we have two brisas that seem to be teaching the same principle, which is that a mumar ultimately cannot be offering korbanos. So answers the Gemara, chada b'chadas v'chada b'ola. Well, the first brisa was talking about a korban ola. Adam ki akriv mikem is a korban ola, and olas nedava. The brisa that we just learned now is by chatas. So it's teaching that a mumar l'chol haTorah kula cannot offer an ola, and also cannot offer, and now we're learning it also cannot offer a chatas v'tzricha, and we need to teach about both scenarios. Diashmo'inon chatas, because if we would only have the second brisa that a mumar l'chol haTorah kula cannot offer a chatas, okay, mishum de l'chaparu, because what the purpose of korban chatas is as a kapara, as an atonement. This person is a mumar. He has sinned and he will continue to sin. He's a sinner. What's the point of bringing in atonement offering for somebody who really has no interest in atonement? And atonement is good when there's an interest in never doing it again, and it's water under the bridge, let's just put this behind us, and you get atoned and you move on with your life. But a person who's inherently a sinner, what's the point of bringing a korban chatas? Even if it happens to be that this particular sin was by accident. Aval ola de dorinu, but in ola, which is a gift, he's bringing a gift to the Rebbeinu Shalom, let him bring a gift. Maybe we'll accept it from him. V'ashma'in and ola, and if we only had the first brisa that says that a mumar l'chol haTorah kula cannot bring off a korban ola, mishum de lav chiyuva hu, because it's voluntary. There's no obligation to bring it. Let's go right there for a second. Aval chatas de chiyuva hu, aim l'kabel mine, but a korban chatas, which is a chiyuv. You have a chiyuv to bring a chatas. Anybody else who does this sin would be obligated to bring a korban chatas. it would be ki'ilu if we say that he doesn't have to bring the korban chatas, a mumar l'chol Torah kula, where he's like getting off the hook ki'ilu. It's like you have a mumar l'chol Torah kula, he sins, and he doesn't even need to bring a korban chatas. So maybe we davka make him bring a korban chatas, just that he shouldn't be getting off the hook in any kind of way. But maybe by a korban ola, which is entirely voluntary, we say, hey, we don't want to accept your korbanos, do tshuva. So tzricha, so we need both examples to say that both by a chatas and by an ola, we would not accept the korbanos if we're talking about the offerer who is a mumar l'chol Torah kula. V'chol eicha tichsiv behema greisai. We had said in the first brisa that mina behema means a person who's like an animal. Just like an animal doesn't do mitzvahs, this is a person who doesn't do mitzvahs. He is a posheya, and nonetheless we accept korbanos from him. Fine. So does that mean that, so behema was sort of a negative thing in that context? Is it always negative? That the Rabbeinu Shalom salvations man and animal. That's a positive thing. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Elu b'nei Adam she'ein arumin b'das u'mesimin atzman ki behema. That Adam u'vehema is a reference to people who have an intellect and yet they are modest, they are humble. They make themselves as if they're an animal. They're humble people. So it's a positive thing. Hasam ksiv Adam uvehema, acha ksiv behema lechuda. Well, there it says Adam uvehema, so there when it says Adam and behema, it's positive. When it only says behema alone, it's negative. Wait, but whenever it says Adam and behema, it's positive. The pasuk says in Yirmiyah that the Rabban Shalom will sow in Israel the seed of man and the seed of behema. And as Rashi points out, behema is a person who, what does Rashi say? Lo karav lo shana. He didn't read Psuki, he didn't learn Tanakh, he didn't learn Mishnayos, nor Gemara. It's not the best, most exemplary yid. So even though it says Adam and it says behema, it's still b'diavad. It's not such a great situation. So hasam chalke kra zera Adam l'chud v'zera behema l'chud. Yes, but in that pasuk, the pasuk itself divided it up. It says zera Adam v'zera behema. They they explicitly divided it into two groups, and therefore in that case the behema would be negative. But Adam u'behema is positive. Friends, we are going to hold it here for Daf Hey of Masechta Chullin. Daf 5 of Masechta Chullin be'etzem had two large discussions. The first one is eating the shechitah of a mumar l'avodah zarah. This was really a continuation, and we really went deeper in and expanded upon the discussion from the end of the daf yesterday. The shita of Rav Anan Amar Shmuel, who says that somebody who's mumar l'avodah zarah, that they do avodah zarah, we can rely upon their shechitah. We then had we went through a sort of story, but when Yehoshaphat went to Achav and there was a whole bunch of meat being served, and the question is, what was Yehoshaphat in fact eating Achav's meat? In the end, we seem to conclude, yes, Yehoshaphat was eating Achav's meat, even though Achav was an Oved avodah zarah. Nonetheless, Yehoshaphat ate his meat, which was a raya for Rav Anan. However, kind of moving on to the next section of the daf, which was Mumars offering korbanos, we had said there that a mumar l'davar echad, a mumar, let's say mumar la'arelis, for example, can offer korbanos. A mumar l'chol Torah kula cannot offer korbanos. And we said there that a mumar la'avodah zarah is considered like a mumar l'chol Torah kula and cannot offer korbanos. He can't bring a korban. So we see from that brisa that mumar la'avodah zarah is considered a mumar l'chol Torah kula, and therefore we shouldn't be able to rely upon their shechitah either. And that was taka akasha on Rav Anan. Okay, be'etzem, that was really the two big sugyas on today's daf. Have a great Lag BaOmer. Have a great day. I'll catch you all tomorrow. Cheers.